Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. If you're new to the channel, then my name is Matt and this channel is all about the Eclipse Scripting API. I am a medical dosimetrist and have not been formally trained in programming. I began my journey of programming a few years ago, and so we have if you're new to ESAPI, which is short for the Eclipse Scripting API, then I have an introduction video as well as some other introductory videos to C#, to programming in general, and to the Eclipse Scripting API. So if you're not familiar, then feel free to go and watch those. But if you are, or if you just want to see what it's all about, in this video we're going to actually begin our first project. And so on the to-do list we have, I want to create a single file plugin script or project, and then we're going to write a very basic program that will calculate the conformity index for a target. And then we're also going to, after we do that, then we're going to create a GitHub account and save our program or our repository. So if you're ready, then let's just get started. Okay, so I had paused the video and I went ahead and put together a sample SBRT plan to provide a little bit of context for what we're trying to do. This is for people that maybe you're not as familiar with treatment planning or that sort of thing. So essentially you have let me turn this off. Yeah, okay, so this blue object right here is called a structure. We call this the target. And there's been a certain number of dose or radiation that's been prescribed to it. And so we've created this treatment plan, and this is just a test patient, so this isn't like a real setting or anything like that. But we have, so we've created this treatment plan, and so we have this dose. Well, it's a really high dose that's treated in a small number of fractions or treatments. And so we want to maximize the dose that's inside the target, but we want to minimize the amount of intermediate or the dose that's outside of the target. So SBRTs, or stereotactic body radiotherapy, the goal is to put a high amount of dose into the tumor and have really sharp fall off. Okay, so the things that we want to measure, we call them conformity indices or indexes, and we use a couple. Each treatment center might use different conformity indexes, but some common ones are the CI, or conformity index, which is the simple one is defined as the volume of the 100% divided by the PTV volume. And then the another common one is called the R50. And so the CI that I described, you could call it the R100. And then the R50 is simply the volume of the 50% isodose line divided by the PTV volume. And then there's another conformity index called the Paddock CI, which the R100 tells you the sort of the ratio of the prescription dose to the target volume, but it doesn't necessarily tell you where that volume is. It just, so there's no location built into the calculation. It's simply the volume of the 100%. That volume could be anywhere inside the body, or that dose could be, anywhere in the body. So like if a portion of it is outside of the PTV, then you won't get that from that calculation. Okay, so technically you could have a value of 1, which would be, a perfect CI or R100. But if you have half of that volume outside the PTV, you wouldn't know it. And then so there's this other one that's called it's called the Paddock CI, and it takes into account the formula is a little different, so it takes into account location. So it takes into account the volume of the 100% that's in the PTV, as opposed to just that's in the body. Okay, so this is just some context. And so this is what we're going to be measuring, right? So we want to write a script. We don't want to have to, so currently, if you had a plan like this, what you might have to do is you might have to go to this DVH, and you would, let's say you'd put it on absolute volume, and then you'd go to the, you could take it away from that, and then you could go to the 50%, and then you'd figure out, okay, so there's 274 cc's of the body that's getting 50% of the dose, and then the volume of the PTV is 75. So let me get a calculator. And so let's see, what did we say it was? Well, 75, and then I think it was 274 or something like that. So 274 divided by 75. Okay, so it's 3.65, give or take. And then what we have is a table from RTOG. There was a protocol that I believe a lot of people still use this, but I can pull it up in just a second. So this right here, there's this table, and so it's based on the PTV volume. So 75 cc's. So somewhere between 70 and 95, closer to 70 would be the PTV volume. So you'd come over here and you'd say, okay, so the ideal ratio would be between 3.5 and 3.3, and we just calculated 3.65. But there's a minor deviation that's allowed up. You know, you could be up to 4.8 and you'd be fine. You know, or so probably maybe let's just call it 4.7. So you'd want it less than 4.7 or something like that. And basically what you do is you put in you interpolate between here and here and here and here, and you figure out, okay, you know your volume, so then you need to calculate the interpolation value between 3.5 and 3.3. So that's another thing that we can and will do. We'll program that, so that way we'll, you know, based on the PTV volumes, or the PTV's volume, we'll be able to figure out programmatically what the ratio, the ideal and the variation acceptable values should be, right? And we also, we don't want to have to do this manually every single time. So imagine, so we just calculated, like we just did a rough calculation, and our current value is 3.65, and so this is just a test plan that I ran just really quickly to have you know, an example. And so, you know, after just one run, you know, you might say, okay, well now I want to run it again, so I'd make a copy of the plan. Or if you're feeling you know, risky or daring, then you might just, you know, rerun this plan without making a copy. But probably you would make a copy, and then you would run it again, and then you'd have to manually calculate it again. So then now you'd have two plans, and then you would go back and forth and until you get a value that, you know, or a plan that you're happy with, right? So all right, so that's the goal, or, you know, the reason that this is useful, right? We don't want to have to do this automatically. And, you know, we didn't spend that long, you know, to do this. You know, we just kind of put this in. Maybe you have a spreadsheet or whatever. But now you want to do the CI or the R100. And then now you want to calculate the paddock CI, right? So you can imagine we can just write a script that will calculate those things for us and present them to us like within a few seconds, right? So that's what we're going to do. So we've got that context. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create a single file plugin project. So we're just going to make this as simple as we can to start, and then we will build from there. So let's see, I've got so I'm going to run the script wizard in version 15, and it looks like this. And I can close this. So I'm sorry that this is really small, but I'm gonna name it. So I'm gonna call this conformity check. And you can call it whatever you want, but or we'll call it conformity checks. Single file plugin, and then I want to change the location. So we'll just click here and then here. And so if you remember, eventually what I would like to do in this video is create a GitHub account. And depending on how long this video winds up being, we might do this in another video, but just to kind of split it up, but we'll see. We'll see how we go. All right, so I'm going to create it in this folder, and then eventually I'm going to turn this folder into a GitHub repository. Okay, so that way it can be managed by the account. So anyway, so I'm going to create it here, and I'm going to go ahead and launch Visual Studio 2019. I can close this. Whoop. Okay, so I might have tried to close that too soon. Okay, now it works. Okay, so this is, and I hope, yeah, you should be able to see this. I've got it blown up to 200%, so I may have to make this a little smaller at some point. But if you're not familiar with any of this, if all of this is foreign, then I have some introductory videos that will kind of cover some of the, the basics of ESAPI and using the Eclipse scripting API. So what we've done is we've created a single file plugin, and I'll just go over it really quickly. We have this, what it did is inside this repos folder, it created two folders, plugins and projects. And actually, what I want to do is I want to actually put these in another one. So let's call this one conformity checks. Okay, so this is that first project that we're going to, and then I want to move. Well, let me close this. I'll save it. Save. Okay, now let's move these into there. Okay. And so what it did is it created these two folders, plugins and projects, and our C# project is in here, and we just saved that solution. So this is what we'll run when we want access to the DLLs, to the Eclipse scripting API, like IntelliSense. If we want to use IntelliSense, then we'll use this. The script that we'll actually run in Eclipse will be just this single file, CS file. Okay, so this is the same exact script, which I don't know why it keeps launching in 2017, but it did. So this is that same exact script, but again, it's just a single file, and it has to be run within Eclipse. And I'll open it again just so you can see. So what Eclipse does is it looks for this namespace. When you run the script inside of Eclipse, or like inside of a plan or whatever, it looks for this namespace, and then it looks for a class called script, and then inside script it looks for this execute method. Okay, so, and then it runs whatever you put. So you put all of your code in here, right? So they added this comment that says to do, add your code here, etc. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to we're going to hopefully run through this pretty quickly. But because I want this to be like the simplest form that this could be, at all. So we have this script context, and this is the context of whatever patient that we've run it in. Okay, so if there's not a patient open or whatever, so we can just create. We don't need this, but because all we're going to do is just present a message to the user that whatever the values are. Okay, so we're going to let's say string. Let's call patient ID equals context dot patient dot ID. Okay, and then let's do string plan ID equals context dot plan setup ID. And first, let's do some checks. So I'm going to get rid of that. And let's add some comments too. Okay. And this may seem kind of silly because we're naming them explicitly, but I talked about some of the important things to consider when you're naming things and when you're adding comments. If you don't name, like we could name this PID, whatever. You can name it whatever you want if you're following along and you're doing your own thing. But when we're naming things, I'm gonna try to name things as explicitly as possible, so that and I'm gonna try to add comments so that if we come back through and read this later, we can say, okay, so for some reason this says course dot first dot ID. Let's say just for whatever reason it somehow got changed to that, right? And we've named it patient ID, and we have a comment here, patient ID. And we come back through and we read this, and we're like, that's not right. Okay, so it may seem silly. That's probably a bad example, right? But it could be, maybe this accidentally got changed to plan setup ID, right? Okay. All right, so let's do... let's check to make sure there's a patient first. Okay, so if context dot patient, well, I guess I've already kind of ruined it, but so if it's null, then I was going to say I could just let, not do this and then run it without a patient so you could see what it would do, but basically it would crash. So I kind of already ruined that one. But we'll just say, let's just provide a message to the user. So we'll say, we're already referencing system.windows, so we can say message box.show, and it takes a string. So there's a bunch of different methods that can take different things. So you can see there's 12, right? So 2 of 12 has 2 different things. So anyway, so this is going to take a string. And so let's just provide a message that says, please open a patient. Okay. And then we'll say return to end the script. And then let's do another one that says if context dot plan setup dot dose dot well, actually let's say plan setup is null, or context dot plan setup dot dose dot is, let's see, dose is dose valid equals false. Okay, so is dose valid, if we hover over we see that it's a Boolean. Okay, so if the plan setup itself is null, so in other words there's not a plan pulled in, or the dose is invalid, we'll say let's just copy this, okay, and say please open a plan and ensure it has calculated dose. Okay. Then there's another thing that we need to check for that says if context.plan setup. Well, you know what, actually, we're going to do this in relative anyway. We don't need to know the dose, the absolute dose, so we won't worry about that. I was going to say we need to check to make sure that there's a dose per fraction. Well, we actually do need that, because otherwise it still wouldn't know what 100% is. Well, would it? No, you have, okay, if dose is calculated, if you've optimized a plan, you have to have a dose and dose fraction. I think you need both in order to. I'm pretty sure you need both. So we'll come to that if we ever see this script crash for some reason that we don't know, then we'll figure that out. And then there's another thing that we can do too. And if you're new to programming, then a lot of the things that I'm talking about, you're probably like, what? But just bear with me. We're just trying to make this a very quick, project. So let's see. So if both of those pass, if both those tests pass, then let's just put everything in a try catch statement. Okay. And what this will do is this will handle anything else. And we will add another message. So I copied that, and I'll say something like, please, let's see, sorry, something went wrong. Okay, and then the other thing that we can do is let's make this a string that we can add variables to. So this is called string interpolation. So there's two ways that you could do this. This is the easy way. And if you're working on version 15, you should be able to do this. If you're on 13, I'll show you in a second what you might need to do instead. But what we're going to do is we're going to add some new lines to add some space, and we're going to add this exception here. We're going to give it a variable or a parameter name or whatever, and we're going to say x.message, and then we're going to do exception.stacktrace. Okay, and this will give us the like what actually went wrong. And then we're also going to pass this upward so that the actual error will get thrown as well, and it will provide some more information. Okay, so I'll just show you real quick. If you can't use string interpolation, then what you would do is string.format. Okay, and then we'll add another parentheses at the end. And what we'll do is, instead of putting X message here, we'll get rid of that. And what you do is, after the string, you put in, and inside that parentheses, so this is still in this string.format parentheses, you add in whatever objects that you have. So we'll put in a 0 here for like a placeholder, and then we'll cut this and put in a 1. And remember, this is 0 index, so the 0 is the first index. So that's this first position. This is the 0th position. Okay, this is the first position, but it's actually the second position. Like this is 0, this is 1. Okay, so that's 0 index. That's what that means. All right. So if for whatever reason you can't use, and actually, you know what? That's actually a good point. Because we're in a single file plugin, we actually can't even use, at least on my version, you can't even use string interpolation. Okay, so we actually have to use it. It doesn't recognize this $, right? So if we ran this script, we would see that that's what that would do. And you know what? Let's just go ahead and test the script. Okay, so let's write message box dot show, and let's just say I'm working. Okay. All right. So we've saved this, and then I'm going to pause the video and then pull up Eclipse so that we can. I'll be back in just a second. Okay. So all I've done is I've just switched over this folder so that I'm in, my dev, repos, conformity checks, plugins. Okay, so you're going to want to look in your plugins folder. If you go into the projects folder, you won't find anything. There's nothing there, okay, because it's looking for a CS file. So it's looking for files that end in CS and files that end in esapi.dll. Okay. So sorry, my phone's vibrating. So anyway, so you're going to want, for single file plugins, you're going to want to be in this plugins directory. And we don't see anything, and the only reason that we don't see anything is because it's down here, it says show folders only. So if you change to all files, you can see conformity checks, okay? So we've opened that, and let's just run it really quickly. So I'm working, okay? And let's close this. Well, let's close this plan. We won't close the patient. We won't test that one, but let's just check it. Let's try it again. And okay, so please open a plan and ensure it has calculated dose. Okay, so good. So that's working. Okay, so we can open this plan again. All right, we'll open this course. Okay, so yeah, so that's working. So that's good. So now let's go back to this. And okay, so we don't need this anymore. All right, so we've got the patient ID, so we can display that. Okay, and then we've got some checks. Okay, and actually let's just write a comment here. String interpolation does not work in single file plugins. Okay. All right. So okay. So we need a few things. All right. So we need to get the PTV, right? Because we need the PTV volume, right? So we need to get the PTV volume, and we need the dose at 50% RX. RX is short for prescription, if you're not familiar with treatment planning. And 100% RX, okay? And then we need to calculate the R100, which is the CI, like a basic CI. Basic CI and R50. And really these are, if you were reading this like in a paper or something, you'd see a capital R. All right, and R50. Okay, so, and then we need to display info to user, right? Okay, so let's get the PTV volume. So I think that makes sense, right? So let's say double PTV volume equals, and actually let's get the plan so we don't have to keep writing context. Plan current selected plan, okay? So we'll say plan setup, plan equals context dot plan setup, okay? And if we wanted to, really we could do this. Oops. And what I'm doing is I'm holding down Alt and hitting up and down, and that's how I'm moving that quickly. Okay, and then here we could just do plan. Okay, all right. So let's do plan dot. Let's see if there's a target volume ID. Okay, so that's the target volume ID. So I think I'll do this in a bunch of steps so that you can see. Let's get the, so let's say target volume ID. So we'll say string target ID equals plan dot plan, let's see, what was it? Plan target volume target volume ID. Okay. And then let's get the target. So we want to get the target from the structure set. So we want to say, we'll say the structure set. And this is, like I said, I'm just going to do this in a bunch of steps so that you can see how each of these is done. But we could also shorten this tremendously. Okay. But if you're new to programming, I kind of want to start with some of the basics. So structure set. So we'll say the current plans structure set. So we'll say structure set equals, and you know what you could also do is just say var, right? But like I said, I'm trying to be as explicit as possible. Okay, so so structure set. I'll just explain why just really quickly. So if I say var, right, and I did context dot plan setup dot course, okay, on accident, then there's nothing wrong with this. Var does not care. It does not care what we give it, because what it's doing is it's figuring out what its value type is going to be on the fly. Okay, so basically it's waiting until it's defined, and then it's saying, oh, I'm a course. So from now on, I'm a course. Okay, so if I hover over a structure set, it says it's a course, right? But that's why if we are being explicit, then now it's complaining, right? So it says, if we hover over it, it says, cannot implicitly convert type yada 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 course to yada 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 structure set, right? So it just can't do that. So structure set. All right. So we want to get the target. So we'll do, so this is a structure. Target equals structure set. And actually, I'm not doing this the longest way possible. What you would do is you would actually have to, so I'll show the long way. So we would say for each var, so here I am using var because I don't need to be explicit here. So for each var s structure, S is short for structure in my mind. You can also type out structure if you want. But in structure set dot structures, right? So that's a list of structures. Well, it's an IEnumerable, but this will work. So that means we can enumerate through it. If s.id equals target ID. So and if you're new to C# or programming, in C#, 2 equal signs means if it equals. So it's like a test. This is like a true or false test. So if this is true, then it will enter this whatever logic is inside these brackets. If it's not true, it will skip it. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to say, okay, so we need to declare a target outside of this if statement. That way we can use it, outside of these brackets. Okay. So we want to say structure target. Okay, that's all we need to do. And it's just complaining. It's not even really complaining. It's just the green squigglies just mean like, hey, like what's going on here? Like maybe you don't need this. So what we're going to do is we're going to say target equals S. Okay. So for each, it's going to loop through all of the structures that are in the structure set, and it's going to check each one and say, does this structure, so for each structure, it's going to say, does the structure's ID equal the target's ID? And then if it does, then we want to set the target equal to that structure. Okay, so this is the long way that you could do this. All right, so I'm going to comment this out, and I'll comment this out as well. That way, you know, that's all together. And we'll say target long way. Okay, and we'll say target short way. And we'll say structure target equals structure set dot structures dot where. Actually, you know what we could do for, we don't even need to do a, so we're going to select the first structure, first or default structure, where, and so this is link. Link stands for, well, if we hover over it, it should say, actually it doesn't. Let's see. Anyway, link stands for, let's see. Let's search. L-I-N-Q. Link C#. Language integrated query. Okay, so it's a query built into the line of code basically. So, and this is just the syntax that you use. So what it's doing is we're declaring like an anonymous variable. So each structure. So if you wanted to, you could type structure. Okay, and it's looping through the structure sets, or the structure, like the structure set. It's grabbing each structure and it's declaring that as a variable name called structure, and then we would test. We would insert our test. So structure.id equals target, what do we call it? Target ID. Okay. So this would be the short way, right? So what it's going to do is it's going to, the first match that it finds, it's going to select that, okay? Now, the reason that this says first or default is, like, we know that there's a target volume ID, right? Now, there's not always one, but we know that we've selected one. So if we go back over here, there's been a target volume that's been selected. So we know that there's an ID. But like if we had not selected this, then this would be blank, and then there would be no matches. And then if there's no matches, then if you select first and there's no matches, then it crashes. Like it doesn't have anything to select. So if you do or default, it'll just return null. Okay. So in other words, the default, and I think you can actually give it a, maybe you could give it a default value. Yeah, I think you can give it a default value, I think. So, so yeah. And then the reason that I wrote X is because generally, like you'll see, usually you'll see something like this, or maybe you'll see O for like object. Okay, so the object, you've created an anonymous parameter, and then you're just accessing it. But a lot of times, like especially people that like physicists or you know, people that like math, a lot of times they'll just use X. But you could use like S. A lot of like sometimes I'll use whatever letter that I would have, like up here you can see I used S, right? So a lot of times whatever letter I would use, I use that as well, because I'm looping through the structures, so, you know, S, that makes sense. But really, it really doesn't matter, okay? As long as you, whatever parameter you declare, you use it here, okay? So anyway, so we know that that's selected, so we know we're going to return a target. But if we didn't return a target, we might want to check for that. So if target is not equal to null, okay? And this exclamation point before the equal sign means not equal, okay? So then, so if it's not null, Or we could say, so if the target's null, we could, you know, do something like this. Please select a target volume, right? And then it would leave the script, right? It will end the script. Okay, so then if it's not null, so the other option would be if we did not, then we would need to put our logic in this bracket, right? But since we're testing if it is null and we're ending if that happens, then we'll just continue outside. Okay, so we've gotten the target, so now we need to get the target. Well, let's just call this target volume. Okay, so let me delete this, and so double target volume equals target dot volume. Okay. All right, and then we need the dose at 50% and 100%. So let's say double dose, let's just call it dose 50%. Rx equals, let's see, I might have to think about this for a second. I think, because we need to get the DVH. So I think we need the plan get, okay, here we go. So we've got a plan and we have that has dose, right? So we've already checked to make sure there is dose, and we want to get dose at volume. Actually, no, we want to get, what's going on here? We actually want to get, what just happened? Oh, just had a bunch of spaces highlighted. Ooh. Okay, so we want to get volume at dose. And if you, so when I clicked away and like was having problems, I lost my IntelliSense. So if you lose it and you want to get it back, just hit Control Space, okay? And you'll get it back on whatever letters that you've typed. The other thing you might be able to do is just, yeah, I guess you need Control the space and plus the space bar. Okay, so we want get volume at dose, right? And so this is a method, and it's going to take some parameters. So in order to see the parameters, I just typed a comma, but you could also just hover over it, and it would tell you. All right, so we need a structure. So we have that. We have the target, right? And then we need a volume. No, we need a dose value. So this is going to be a dose value. So let's say new dose value, because we can declare it inside, and we need a new dose value needs a value, so a double value. So let's say 50, because we want the dose at 50%, and then it needs a dose unit. So let's see. So we need a dose value. Dose value dot dose unit dot percent. Okay, so that's a new dose value. And you know, the other thing that we could say, we could take this out and we could make a variable, but see, we can declare it inside it. So that's just what I like to do. And then I forget what the last one was. Oh, and it needs a volume presentation. So we'll say volume presentation. So the IntelliSense gave it to me. And then since we're running off of the lines, I'm just going to, this is a nice thing that you can do, is you can go down to each line after like the, you know, wherever you want, after the comma. Okay, so so we need a volume presentation. So let's do, let's see, we need the dose at volume. So we want to do, well, really the volume presentation doesn't matter. We're not returning that. We're returning the dose. And we want, let's see, this is going to be, you know what? We don't know. I think I guess it doesn't really matter. let's see. No, we want the volume at dose. So what volume do we want? We want absolute volume, duh. So let's do that. We want absolute volume, okay? And so we're returning the, okay. Yeah, see, I wrote this. I wrote this comment wrong. So we want the volume at 50. So we'll just say we'll do one comment for each one. The 50% IDL or isodose line. Okay, and this is 50% of the RX prescription dose. Okay. All right. So, and then we've named our volume at 50%. Whoop. Can't do that. Okay. Percent RX. Volume at 50% RX. Okay. Oh, you know what we did? We don't want to do this for the target. I'm so silly. We need the body. So first let's get the body. So we need to, let's get the body. When do we, okay, so we did the structure set here. So let's do get the body. And in this case, I think it's named external. But so we'll say structure body equals structure set dot structure set dot, oh, I can't spell right now. Structure set dot structures dot first, whoops, or default, and then we're going to do the same thing that we did below. We won't do this a long way, but we're going to do, we want the DICOM type equals, I forget, I think it's just external, and I think it's all caps, I think. I can't remember. We'll have to check. It could just say body, but I'm pretty sure it's external. I can't remember. Let's see. Let's hover over. It might tell us. PTV marker, of course not. So let's just test it. Let's say message box dot show body dot ID. And let's just see if it crashes. And let's see. We won't return. We'll just test it and then see if it works. Okay. Let's see. Run. External. So it did get it. Okay, good. All right. So sometimes you need to test things. Okay. So let's go back to our code. Okay. So we got that. All right. So we've successfully gotten the body structure. So that is what we want. We want the body. Actually, may not even need. Oh, well, we need the target volume. So so we've gotten that. Okay, so we actually want to get the 50% isodose line of the body structure. Duh. Okay, and then let's just copy this. And then we also want, well, eventually we'll need the 100, right, for the CI. So the volume at 100. So let's say, well, that'll work. Okay, so, and then let's change this from 50 to 100. Okay. Okay, so now let's add some space just for readability. All right, so now we've got those values. So now let's calculate them. Okay, so the R100, so we'll say R100. So we're going to say double R 100 equals the volume at 100% Rx divided by the target volume. Okay, and then so let's add a comment. The R50, so double R50 equals volume at 50% Rx divided by target volume. Okay, and then we want to display it to the user. So let's do a message box dot show, and we'll need to do a string dot format. And in there, we're going to, let's add the, just for fun, since we've gotten it, let's add a few things. So let's do patient, and then let's tab, we won't tab over, but so we'll say patient is, well, actually let's do patient ID. Okay, and well, yeah, so we've got a placeholder. Okay, so then we could add patient ID, and then let's do a new line and say plan ID, and then do those are about the same length. So let's add a tab so we can space some of these things out some. Okay, and then let's add the next one. So the next one is 1, right? Because it's, remember, 0 index, so we start with 0. And we want the plan ID. Okay, so let's do a new line again, and let's actually add a couple, and let's say, let's give a few statistics. Let's do the max dose, and let's do a tab, and let's say, let's give it in percentage, okay? Because, you know, sometimes we do 50 gray, sometimes we do, you know, 48 or whatever, it doesn't matter. But sometimes it's just easier to think of it in percentage, because maybe you know your doctor wants it less than 135, or maybe they want it at least 150, or, you know, whatever. Because remember, this is a really high dose in a short number of treatments, so the whole point of it is to be hot. So we know this is going to be 2, and let's add some formatting. So we want, it's in percentage, so let's give it only 1 decimal place. The other thing we could do is we could just round the value, but you can also do a string format right here. Okay, so, and then before we let's space this out a little bit. So I hit enter after this new line, right? Because we're adding a new line, so it's almost like it, and we could actually, if you wanted to, we could do this, and then we could space this out like this. And then, so now we've got our new lines. So let's add max dose. So I'm doing it after the new lines so that it kind of looks like how we're going to do it. And what it's doing is, because I'm inside the string and I hit enter, it's closing that line string, that portion of the string, and it's adding a plus sign to concatenate it, to add it together. And then it's adding, you know, the next line. Okay. So it's something that it's doing for us. The other thing, if we wanted to, we could say plus, and then go down here and add a string ourselves, right? But instead of that, it's nice to be able to do that. Okay, so that's the max dose. And then let's say the R100 CI, and let's tab that over. Oh, we need to add our new line, so we didn't do that. Okay, and then let's do, okay, so tab, and then let's add our, So this is the third position, and let's do, we know we need to format this. This is in absolute volume. Well, no, it's R100. Let's just do 1 decimal place for that. And then we'll do the R50. And then this measures gradient, right? We may not need to tab or be able to tab this, or maybe we need 2 tabs here. We can fix that in a minute. But all right, so this is going to be 4, and let's do to 1 decimal place as well. Okay, so we've got, we'll just go ahead and bring these down. So we've got patient ID, plan ID. We haven't actually gotten the max dose yet, so let's do plan.dose dose max 3D dot, and we want it in percentage. So actually, let's instead of doing this, let's just give it the max dose. Let's see, plan.dose. I don't want to have to set it. Because what you can do is you could say, you can actually explicitly tell it what you want the dose unit to be in. Plan.dose dot, let's see. So we could say is equals true. Then we want, so if it's absolute, I don't want to do this. I want to keep it simple. So, okay, so for simplicity's sake, well, let's just not give it that value there. And what's nice is, let's get rid of this, because I don't want to, if you're new to programming, I don't want to, we'll mess with that later. It's a very useful thing, but okay, so dose max 3D, if we hover over it, this isn't a so we're actually going to get rid of this too, because it shouldn't be like to like a bunch of decimals. It should just be like 1 or a few decimals. Okay, so this is a dose value, and what dose values are, if you remember up here, a dose value has a value and a unit. So if we just print this, being inside the string will automatically turn it to a string, but maybe you want to explicitly say to string. This will give it both the dose value, dose like the number, and the unit, which is kind of nice. Okay, so then after the, let's just go ahead and bring this down, bring this down. Okay, so max dose, so now we need the, what did we call it? The R100, and the R50. Okay, so I believe that should do it. So we've saved it. And let's go and run it. Haha, there you go. So we have, I hope you can see this. Oh, it looks like it might be really small. I'm sorry. Okay, so patient ID. So then we have this test patient's ID, and then plan ID, right? It's over here, long SBRT. And then we have a max dose of 132.2%. And then we have the R100. Oh, so okay, so we can see there's not a new line after the R100. So let's go to our code, and you've probably been yelling at me to add that. Silly me. Okay, so let's do that, and actually let's add a little bit more space after the max, and let's go ahead and add a new one. Okay, that way it just has a little more space in between each thing. Makes it a little easier to see, and it might be easier for you to see too. Okay, All right, so we've got patient ID, plan ID, which, you know, is kind of redundant because, you know, obviously we have that, that's what's pulled in, but, you know, for sanity check, I guess. Okay, so max dose, we have our R100, which is 1.0, and then we have our R50 gradient. So let's add another tab after this one so we can get these two right here, okay? And actually for the R50, we should probably do to more decimal places, probably 2, right? So let's change this to F2, and then that will do that. Now, keep in mind that this does not round to numbers. It just creates almost like a substring with that many, you know, values, okay? So we wanted to add another tab here, so let's try that. Get them hopefully underneath each other. And then we change the number of, but just remember it's not rounded. If you want like the actual rounded value, then you would probably need, well, okay, I should say to my understanding it's not rounded. I think it's just like a substring basically. And we could test that, but we're not going to test that right now, okay? Okay, there. So now it's right over each other, and so now we can see. You know, earlier, if you were watching earlier, we had done some rough calculation. It was like 3.65 something. So there you go. So now what you would need to do is you would need to, you know, we haven't done that yet. We'll do that next, and we'll do it in sort of a in a smart way that we can use it in the future. And you know, we could actually, so let's actually change this to absolute dose, and let's see what the difference is now with the, oh, actually it still did it in percentage. That's interesting. I guess we would need to set the plan's dose unit. I think we could set it to absolute. So like if we did plan.dose value presentation equals dose value presentation dot absolute. So now if we ran it, we would get it in gray. So that's how you would change that. If you want it in gray, you can explicitly say that you want the plan's dose value presentation to be in absolute dose. Okay. And since we're, you know, this is kind of silly at this point, but this is kind of what happens. You start, you know, figuring out some formatting just to make it look pretty. But now everything is spaced out evenly, right? So that's good. That's nice. So there you go. If you're looking if you have something with like, you know, a single PTV and you always set your PTV to as the target volume, then absolutely this would work, right? So if we, like, let's test it. If we go to plan properties, we can actually remove the target that's selected by just selecting nothing. So now it doesn't know, it actually didn't know how to normalize because it was normalized to the volume, and we won't get into that, but yeah, so now let's run it and see if it, whoa, that's the wrong thing. And let's see if it will crash. Please select a target volume. So there you go. We tested that and it works. So it's always nice to let your user know what needs to be done as opposed to the script just silently or even rudely, you know, crashing and, you know, complaining to you. All right. So let's see. We've been going, oh my goodness. Wow. So this video is already at an hour. So I will hold off on creating the GitHub account for another video. That way we don't make this any longer than it needs to be. So there you go. Congratulations to everyone. If this is your first, you know, useful script that you've written, I hope that it makes sense. If you have any questions or concerns or anything, then or requests or whatever, then be sure to leave a comment below. And if if you want to follow along, then be sure to like and subscribe. And then what I'd like to do next is to begin to build this out to make it more robust, to give the user the opportunity to select the target, potentially maybe add a user interface, and that sort of thing. So because there's other instances. Oh, the other thing too that we definitely want to do is to calculate the ideal and variation acceptable values for the R50, right? And we also want to add like the paddock CI. We want to add that, and we want to be able to account for when there's multiple PTVs, right? So like we have the target volume, but maybe there's 2 PTVs, right? And maybe not. That's probably it. It does happen in SBRTs, but it's more common in things like frameless, right? So if you have a frameless, which is in the brain, you have a SRS or SRT or something like that, they're treating lesions that are in the brain. You might have several lesions, and you might want to calculate them either all together or some places want them calculated individually. So maybe you need this to be more robust. So if that's not of interest, if I get a bunch of people telling me that that's not of interest or whatever, then we can move on. However, the goal is to start to make things that are more and more complicated and more robust. So we made this very, very simple and straightforward, right? But it's not, if we're looking at this code, it's not written the best way that it should be, right? Like if you watch some of the other videos where I'm mostly talking like I am now, I talked about things like just some like best practices and some of the different like design principles for writing code, more so specific to C#, but just things in general. You don't want to repeat yourself, right? So there's other scripts, like maybe we also eventually want to write a plan check script, right? And maybe we want to have these features in other scripts that we're going to write. So we don't want to have to rewrite this logic, and we don't want to have to come in here and copy and paste it, right? We can probably write this in a much quicker, more efficient and smarter way, right? And we can write it in a way that is reusable. So what we're probably going to do is create a class that's of itself a conformity check, right? So then you would access this via a method or a behavior of that class object, right? So yeah. All right. Well, I think with that, we'll end the video, and I hope everyone has a great night. And until then, we'll see you.